Hey, everybody. How is everybody doing? Good. I don't want to keep y'all too long, and this is not the fanciest of programs. What this is what hopefully I think what public servants are supposed to do, which is coming into a neighborhood, making yourself available for those that want to learn, that want to know a little bit more about the candidate. My name is Quentin Anthony Anderson. I'm a candidate for the Louisiana State Senate in this upcoming special election. If you are wondering why we're voting again, it is because Cleo Fields, who was the state senator for this area for the last few years, he got elected to Congress last year, and so his seat is vacant. And so that's what we're filling. I did my best to not create a vacancy last year. I ran for Congress in the 6th Congressional District. So if you got a door hanger from me, if you got a phone call from me in the last year, that was what that was. But I learned a lot in that campaign, and it's the reason why I'm running now. And I'll share a little bit more about that in a bit. I want to first sort of introduce myself. This is home for me. I actually graduated from McKinley. Before that, I went to a charter school for a little bit, East Baton Rouge Arts and Technology School, that has the unfortunately ironic acronym of EBRATS. Not sure why they picked that name, but it is what it is. I got my undergraduate degree from Louisiana Tech and then came back home and got my law degree from LSU. My last year at LSU, everybody else did their internships at like law firms and things like that. I did my internship at the Capital Area Alliance for the Homeless, where I did intake for clients. Most of the folks that you see out on the street, and in Baton Rouge, a lot of them have become kind of usual characters. I know everybody, if you're from this area, you're familiar with baby girl at Florida and North Acadian, people like that. She came through there. I had a client who, he was a good man. His name was Harold. He was one of my favorite clients that came in. He used to be an engineer in the 80s, and he kind of fell into the crack epidemic. And so he would have these good periods where he would be one of the smartest people you'd ever meet. And then he'd have his bad periods, which was the reason why he was out there on the street. And I remember years later, maybe 4 or 5 years after I had worked at the Capital Area Alliance for the Homeless, he had been one of the victims of, we had a serial killer who was killing homeless folks, and he had been one of the victims there. So I remember, you never forget the people that you help. And I just remember that gentleman and the fact that it just sort of came back home. And many times, a lot of these tragedies that happen in our community, you're only like 1 or 2 degrees removed from whatever happens. And so I don't tell that story because it necessarily connects to, my charge in life, but it's just another one of those things, right? Where when you live here, a lot of the issues that we talk about are very much connected to you in some way, shape, or form. Since I've been out of law school, I've just worked largely at nonprofits. That's what I do. I help with communications. My job is to make sure that, if it is an all-black nonprofit and it wants to speak to white people, it knows how to do that. And if it's a white nonprofit and it wants to speak to black people, it does that effectively, and that it doesn't sound that it sounds like it comes from the communities that it's trying to speak to. And in that work, I've gotten a chance also to see politics and see leadership. Particularly black leadership, up close and personal, but behind closed doors. And I would say this during the congressional race because of who I was running against, but it applies in this race as well. In that work, what you would see is that many times in districts like ours, like this one, in neighborhoods like this one, that are majority black, we're represented by sometimes people who have been in office for 10, 20, 30 years. They are often the most powerful politicians in the chambers that they serve in. And yet, there is something also in common with most of the districts that those powerful black leaders represent. They're often declining. They're often the places where the schools are underfunded, where the roads look like crap, where you have high crime rates. Now, why is that? Is that because those politicians actually don't really have influence? It just looks like they do? No, because if you go on the Capitol, you'll see that many of those politicians are, chairs of powerful committees, or, they do call the shots on certain things. But what they've learned is that in our community, they can get away with not delivering for us because for a very long time, we got used to a history of disappointment. For many years, people came into our community making all sorts of promises, and they didn't deliver. And they did it again, and then they did it again. And over time, we became transactional. We don't expect anything of those politicians. We don't even listen 9 times out of 10 when they come to our church or when they come and talk to us. Our eyes kind of glaze over. And we will vote for the politician because they give us a turkey dinner or a backpack around back to school, or they just have the biggest sign or the fanciest jingle. Because at the end of the day, from our perspective, none of them are going to do anything for us anyway, so I might as well vote for the one that's going to give me a free dinner. And I understand that. I do get it. Most of them have been full of crap. Most of what they've said, I would not hold anything to it. I wouldn't hold them to what they've told you. But what it does is it feeds into ever-growing cynicism. If you see what our voter numbers are, that's a direct result of that cynicism. That's a direct result of leaders not delivering for the people that they keep on asking for their vote. They keep on coming by every 2 years, every 4 years. They need your vote, and they'll tell you that you have to vote for them. They'll tell black folks, you have to vote for us because the other side is racist. They'll tell women that you have to vote for us because the other side are bigots. But they won't deliver for you once you actually vote for them. They'll just tell you that things could have been worse if you'd voted for the other side. And what ends up happening is we just stop showing up. And we get the government that we both vote for, but we also get the government that we don't vote for. And so the reason why I'm running is twofold. One, I do just want to do the job of being a senator, the job of being a representative in our representative democracy. The reason why you hire a politician like me is because you have your job to do. You have your life to live. You have food that you have to put on your family's table. You have to put a roof over your family's head. You don't have time to be voting on the budget. You don't have time to be, approving or disapproving of government appointees. You are trusting that this brother that came into your neighborhood, put yard signs up, put door hangers on your door, is thinking about your interests and can do that job for you while you're going about your life. But that person cannot do that if they are not in tune with the community, if they're not showing up, if they're not willing to be available. I don't care if there's one person in this room or if there's 50. Me being here is about me listening to you so that if I get elected and I cast those votes, I'm casting it with your interests in mind because I'm listening to those interests. If I'm not showing up, then what am I voting on? How am I voting on your interests if I'm not listening to you? But the other reason why I'm running is because I want to deliver so that I can start to address that cynicism. I want to start to address that cynicism that some of our young people are starting to feel. Not even just some of our young people, that many of us are starting to feel. And I'm only one person, but if you vote for me, and in 2 years, if I'm asking for your vote again, and I haven't delivered, then don't vote for me again. Vote for that young brother that's pointing out the fact that I haven't delivered, that I got comfortable. Because that's what this is. It's a job application. And this is the interview. And if the person that's applying for the job isn't making any sense to you, they're not saying anything that sounds like it's in your interest, because one of the things I always like to tell young people, and I had to learn it in my 20s, when I was applying for jobs, I'd get upset when I wasn't getting the job, when they weren't calling me back, or I'd be like, well, I have all the qualifications, why don't you hire me? And it wasn't about me. That employer has no obligation to hire me. I have to prove how I'm going to be valuable to them in order for them to give me a paycheck. And in that same vein, I'm applying for a job, and it's not about me. This is not my moment. This is not my time. If what I'm saying to you does not fit with what you want to see in your next senator, then don't hire me. Don't vote for me. But the same also should apply for the other people who are running, and not just for this seat. This is the last legislative race, hopefully, between now and 2027. But when those seats come up, if those people aren't telling you something that you want to hear, don't vote for them. And I don't care how long they've been on the ballot. I don't care how close you know them. I don't care if it's your auntie, your uncle. I don't care if it's your pastor. If they're not delivering for you, don't vote for them. Because these elections, these seats, it's not personal, it's business. And so I am applying for the job. My name is Quentin Anthony Anderson. I want to be your next senator. But for the next few minutes, what I actually want to do is I just want to hear from you all. I I want to hear what you all care about. I want to hear what's on your minds. I want to hear how you all are reacting to the headlines that you guys are hearing, both from Washington, but also from Baton Rouge. I want to hear just, what matters to you for the next 2 years. That's what this office is for the next 2 years, filling out this term. What do you guys want to see? It doesn't even matter if it fits within the job description. Just tell me what you all care about, because that's what I'm here to listen to. So thank you all for listening to my piece. Now I kind of want to listen to y'all. Thank you, guys. Okay. Any questions? You guys don't have to. You guys can make me feel awkward and just let me stand up here. I'll just answer questions that come in my head. Yes, ma'am.
So initially,
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Actually seemed as though you would be a person to deliver on what you spoke. Right? So with this seat, what are your plans outside of what the community is asking for you to push for?
Yeah, so what I've run on are 5 things. I have run on raising wages. One of the first pieces of legislation that I want to introduce if I get elected is raising the minimum wage. Now, I'm going to level set with you. It's not going to pass. The current legislature, it's most certainly not going to pass. But what that is me putting my cards on the table. That is a value that's important to me. I think that the minimum wage, which hasn't been raised in the last 20 years, is completely out of whack with the cost of living, especially post-COVID. I actually did the math yesterday on, it wasn't during the town hall, it was afterwards. If you get paid $7.25 right now, you could work 80 hours in a work week and you still make less than the $15 an hour that we're asked, that like at the bare minimum, we're asking them to raise the minimum wage to. You would make less than that person made working a 40-hour work week. If you work twice as long, you'd still make less than what we think is like, all right, but what we think we might be able to get politically. And that's the minimum wage. If it doesn't get raised at the federal level, it's almost certainly not going to get raised in Louisiana, but that does not mean that we cannot, take the fight. I want to protect workers. If you have a job that AI can do right now or will be able to do in the next 18 months, do not be surprised if your employer makes the decision that it is a whole lot more cost effective to purchase a $30,000 robot that can do your job over you. And if that sounds like sci-fi, I know, but that's where the future is right now. The scariest thing that's happening is that Elon Musk purchased the presidency, and he purchased it specifically to be able to get rid of all that red tape, all the red tape that normally would exist. He purchased it so that your employer can more quickly get rid of you. I want to invest in our public schools. I do not believe in diverting any public money away from public schools. I think that public schools are the great equalizer. The purpose of public schools is to make sure that even if you were born to the poorest of poor parents and you live in the poorest of poor neighborhoods, the school around the corner is still the best possible education you can get. And what do conservatives always say? If you work hard and you play by the rules, here in America, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, one, that phrase is actually ironic. It was never meant to be used that way. But secondly, the first part of that equation would mean then, all right, so where do I work hard at? If I work hard around the corner at my local school, is it good enough that no matter what, even though I don't have a whole lot of money, that I can go to that school, and if I get straight A's, I can go to Harvard. I can go to Yale. I can go wherever. If the school around the corner is poor because your neighborhood is poor, then everything else starts to compound. You're not getting into Harvard. Jobs are probably going to look down upon you, whether rightfully so or not. The rightfully so is if you went to a poor school, maybe you don't have the same level of skills as the kids across the street. But the unfair part is maybe you do, but just the perception of your school keeps you down. So if we're not investing in our public schools and making sure that every school around the corner is as good as any other school, then we really are failing in terms of that promise of giving people a shot at the American dream. 2 other things, and I won't continue to drone on. I do want to reduce crime, and it's not just a talking point. What I was telling Regina Barrow on her radio show today, there are some districts where when they talk about crime, they're talking about it, but nobody in that district, nobody listening, is actually at real risk of being a victim of crime. They hear about it in other places. Well, you want to know where those other places are. It's the district that I'm running in. I tell people this all the time. When crime happens in District 14, Is the murderer, is the perpetrator one of my constituents? Yes, but guess who else was? The victim and the victim's family. So when we talk about reducing crime in District 14 or in District 15, we're talking about it because if we don't reduce crime, our constituents become the victims of crime. So it really is a very real thing for us, meaning also that I don't want to just do the performative stuff. Hiring more officers or extending people's sentences will not stop the next kid from boosting a car. It will not stop the next person from shooting somebody. That's the sort of stuff that, again, people in districts that aren't ravaged by crime think are the solutions. When you're actually here, all of a sudden you believe, yeah, maybe we do need to invest in education because these kids would not be wilding out if they actually felt like they had a stake in their future. So I want to make sure that the solutions that we're pursuing actually reduce crime, because if we don't reduce crime, it's my constituents who suffer. And then the last thing is I want to expand access to healthcare for everybody. It is a core principle of what is supposed to be the Democratic Party. I would not always say that that's a core principle of the Louisiana Democratic Party, but it is what we're supposed to fight for. And as much as humanly possible, whatever we can do to make it so that, one, everybody has access, whether you're in the city or you're in a rural area, but whether you have money or you don't, trying to make sure that you never have to worry about being able to go to the doctor, go to the hospital, get treated for anything in which we as human beings have a cure for. I want to make sure that you have access to it, because I do believe that healthcare is a right. So that's outside of just listening and soliciting what other people care about. And I was telling somebody, those 5 things are what I'm going into this race on. But as I talk to people, people want to talk to me about housing, home premiums, property insurance premiums. I'm not a homeowner, but I then have to take that on because that is what the overwhelming amount of my constituents cares about. And that's part of the job. So there's going to be stuff that you all care about that I might never have experienced. And that then has to be a top priority for me in the legislature. That's the job. Did I answer properly?
Yeah, so even what you're saying, all of the crime, when I talk to most politics, they try to disconnect it, but crime, wages play a part in crime. They want a person doesn't get up in the morning and decide, hey, you know what, I feel like I want to go out and rob somebody, I feel like I want to go shoot somebody. That is literally against the law.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what type of background you come from. If it comes to it, at the end of the day, you could be the best person in the world, but if it comes to our children starving or we robbing to sit up there and make sure that they eat, that is going to be the, as a parent, it's not a logical thing, but that's going to be what they do, because at the end of the day, they have to survive.
Yeah.
But if you're paying me $7.25 an hour and it costs more for me to send my child to daycare than what I'm paying to go to work, that's when those doors open up for people to commit those crimes, and it builds on top of one another. But most people try to disconnect all of the pillars that you spoke.
Yeah.
They're all going to play into one another. So if one breaks down, then the other three are not going to work. So all of them, like I said, like you're saying, that those are what you're running on. All of those are needed to be able for any district to go and prosper, no matter what part of the
Yeah. I tell people that I think when you have something to lose, you act like it, but when you have nothing to lose, you act like it as well. And I think that is a core principle when you're thinking about public safety, you're thinking about reducing the crime rate. It's that people only commit crimes when they feel like they need to. The reason I don't commit a crime is because I feel like I don't need to. The reason why my job trusts me with the company card is they feel like they pay me enough where I probably am not going to use the company card. We know this logic in our day-to-day lives, but then when it comes to policy, when it comes to criminal justice reform, it's like we lose all sorts of common sense. We know that economic desperation is at the heart of criminality. So if you want to reduce the crime rate, address that. You can do all this other stuff. You can beat the mess out of every perp that you come across. It's not going to reduce the crime rate. And so for me, I just want to avoid doing the policy equivalent of weaving in and out of traffic during rush hour, where it feels like you're moving, but at the end of the day, you might even be worse off than you would have been just kind of staying in the same lane. Anybody else? How are you?
you know Jeff Landry is going to be all about that?
Well, I think so I see that on two tracks. I think practically speaking, we would go back to a day and age in which the only way that you had access to health care is if you had a good job with benefits. And I think that becomes difficult for a lot of people, especially now that you have a lot of people who their incomes are reliant on, things like the gig economy. And part of the reason why people feel comfortable with that is that in the last decade or so, healthcare has been more accessible and people have felt like they don't need to be connected to an employer anymore. I think that it would be very difficult for a lot of people, especially in a state like Louisiana, where it's not like the state government is going to make up for it. The state government's not going to help. We're going to have a compromised budget. So I don't have a good answer for you in terms of what the prospects are going to look like. Politically, if that were to happen, the hope would be that for the next 2 years, Democrats would hang that around the necks of Republicans in all 64 parishes. It is important that we draw a distinction between what Louisiana looks like right now under extreme Republicans and Jeff Landry and what Louisiana could look like if people with different values were in charge. And I think that it's really important that when you know that you're going to have difficult numbers and difficult outcomes in the legislature, it's important that you vote the right way, because I think that your constituents are paying attention. But I also think that it's important then that you take the fight to the other side politically. If they're going to go after your health care, before that vote gets cast, we need to be having town halls. We need to be having rallies in every single district of members that are thinking about taking away your health care. And we need to make sure that they know that there's going to be a cost to doing it. In this state, oftentimes you get screwed without there being any consequences for it happening to you. And it's because everybody was a part of it. Take, for example, the recent tax bill, the tax reforms. Almost every member of the Democratic caucus, but more surprisingly, almost every member of the Black caucus voted to raise the taxes of working class people and cut the taxes of rich folks. I'm just going to speak for most of us Black folks in Louisiana. There are not enough Black millionaires and billionaires for that to have been worth it. And yet they did it because they know that none of us will kick them out of office when they're up for re-election in 2 years. Because they'll be on that ballot. Whatever ballot that you get in the mail, they're going to be on that ballot. And whoever you think that you trust around politics is going to tell you that you have to vote for this brother, this sister who voted to raise your taxes. That when Jeff Landry came up to him and said, I know this is going to be tough for 70805. I know this is going to be tough for 70802. I still need you to vote for it. They were like, oh, where do you want me to sign? So, I say all of that to say that there are going to be a lot of really bad situations in the next 2 years. We have a supermajority of Republicans. It's a radical Republican legislature. We have a radical Republican governor who's trying to do everything he can to impress Donald Trump. So he's trying to out Donald Trump. And we don't have a lot of Democrats that are willing to stand up for the people that they were elected to serve. I say all of that because I want your expectations to be set at the place of what sort of impact somebody can have right now. Most of what we're going to be doing is trying to make a bad situation not as bad. But the other part of what we're going to be doing is hopefully trying to tell you what the stakes are on a regular basis. And that's part of what this job is. So if I get elected in the next couple of months, I'll probably be right here in the same building briefing you on what's going on. And hopefully part of it is not telling you, get ready because healthcare has been taken away. But it is I see what's happening in DC. I'm not stupid. The worst case scenario seems to keep happening every day on the news. Hey, brother.
I just had a question about the severance tax and the argument that a lot of the Republicans' argument is that we're going to, as you said, we're going to raise taxes on everybody else, but the industry and they're untouchable because they provide jobs. What do you say to that argument?
Louisiana has, for a very long time,
They say you can't touch them because, there's jobs, job.
yeah. When I was the communications director for Together Louisiana during the fight, right after John Bel Edwards signed the executive order to allow localities to vote on whether or not we gave tax breaks to companies like ExxonMobil and stuff like that. And what was happening, the reason why Governor Edwards even signed that executive order was, since the 30s, these oil and gas companies had gotten so comfortable with these applications that the requirements that were in those applications, like the things that they were supposed to do in order to get these tax breaks, they weren't even meeting those requirements, but they were still submitting the applications, and the applications were still being approved. And those tax breaks were not, I tell people all the time, tax breaks are not free. They come out of the budget. They come out of local budgets. They come out of state budgets. For most of these companies, they do not need incentives to do what they're going to do. Incentives are supposed to be about enabling you to do something that you otherwise would not be able to do. Incentives are supposed to be a partnership between private enterprise and government. It is, I'm going to do this thing on behalf of government with you as a private enterprise because collectively you're going to do something that is in our collective benefit. What it has become is essentially leverage that private businesses hold over state and local government. And what they say is, if you don't give us this next tax break, we're leaving. If you don't give us this next tax break, we'll just send those jobs somewhere else. There is a difference between a partner and a patsy. And what Louisiana has become is a patsy to almost every corporate interest that comes here. We have become an ATM for these companies. They know that they can advocate for these tax breaks without having to give us the return on investment. So I say all of that as a long way of me saying I'm going to be a whole lot more aggressive when I'm looking at these tax breaks that are being proposed. It's not because I'm against incentives, but I do think that we've been taken advantage of. I don't believe that if you are already doing really well that you need help. I want to help the next Amazon, not the existing Amazon, but the company that's going to be the next Amazon. I want to help, I'm not going to say I want to help the next Exxon, but I want to help the next company that's going to be as big as the next Exxon. And I want to see that. So I am more in favor of tax breaks and tax relief and registration waivers and things like that for small companies on the front end. I want to make it as easy as possible for anybody in this room to start a business. And I know that first one's probably going to fail. That second one might fail too. That third one might fail too. I don't want you, investing your life savings on the front end. I want to make it easy. I want to make it easy for you to start a business and for you to be successful. I think that it's you that needs the tax break. I don't really see Exxon needing the tax break. I've never thought that those big companies needed the tax break. You have to demonstrate a need for me to be open to it.
But then they did the thing where, didn't they pass something about income tax?
Yep.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So effectively, what Landry wanted to do was he wanted to zero out income taxes. He wasn't able to do that for every bracket, but he was able to get it down to, I think, 3%? Is that what it is? He got it down to 3%. And what he said was, to make up for it, because again, tax breaks aren't free, to make up for it, he raised the sales tax on a handful of things, but like everyday goods, things that average people were paying for. The argument that we make, or at least people like me are supposed to make, is that sales taxes are always regressive. And when you start to depend your state budget on sales taxes, in effect, what you're depending on is poor